let's talk about the original show's fashion.
I know.
Angela, we're going to lean on you a little bit for some of these answers.
Drop some knowledge on us.
There's a lot going on when we talk about creating this world. The Avatarverse is known, I think we can all comfortably agree, for being one of the best world building exercises in the history of animation.
Right.
We've had conversations about the influences that have come from the real world, but also you guys were having conversations about the elements themselves, right? And kind of like how all of that comes together. Do you mind talking a little bit about that process as you guys are starting to figure out what everybody's going to wear?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it usually just would come down to where are we, what nation, what show, like what is this group that we're, going to be addressing and, when it came to Earth Nation or Fire Nation and stuff, like in, season 3, when we got to the Fire Nation, then we had to redress everybody. It's like, where are we? It's a little bit warmer climate, and we had to think about that kind of stuff as well. And where, towns were located and stuff. And what was the formality? Was it, upper class, middle class, lower class? Like, what was this, what were the people wearing in that time or in that area, based off of, where a fishing town versus, non-fishing, or a farmer or, the school, obviously, in the Fire Nation. Right. So we had to think about
uniforms.
The uniforms. Yeah. So it was really like interesting to kind of think about how we were going to approach these, individually. And, a lot of times it's a little difficult to think like, oh, we had everything planned out like from the get-go. And a lot of the times I didn't get scripts until I'm ready to launch design. And I'm like, I don't even know where these people are. What are we doing in this episode? I would read it and go, okay, great. Let's jump off from here.
I got my work to do.
Yes. And now we do the deep dive, and, we're kind of, stuck to, sticking to schedules, I would think, right. As best we can. So we're doing as much research in a short amount of time to figure out what we can find and, doing some sketches. I would sit with Brian, do some preliminary ideations of, hey, if everybody's wearing something like this, would you want everybody or all the guys or the girls or, what are we thinking? And, him and I would do a little touch base on this per episode kind of a thing. Okay. And then I would kind of go to my desk and I would sit there and I would go back to, in the early days. So I had an iMac at my desk just for research, but we were drawn on paper, So
wow.
And it was, kind of early-ish days for Google search. I was going to look it up. I don't even know if we had Google image.
Or
basic stuff. Yeah. And it was, a lot of hunting down what, research and reference. And, we try to be as mindful as we could. And, we're talking 20 years ago, with being inspired by, as accurate as we could with some of these costuming and stuff. And of course, it's not a real world. It is a fantasy world. So we are allowed to break rules here. And, also knowing that I think a lot of people want, ideas to be kind of set in stone once we've made them. But I'm like, things were so fluid, sometimes we would break rules just because it looked good or we liked the way it felt or we liked the way it looked. So, there has to be a little gray area there too, how we would do our research and how we would, iterate that on paper and as we're doing our designs and stuff. So we had to make it not a direct one-to-one copy, we're trying to make this the Avatar world, not.
But I think the audience definitely felt the cultural influences from different cultures referencing in different of the elements.
Which you just weren't seeing elsewhere. And like we said, this idea too of like, okay, we have this. There's some style that we're taking some tremendous like respectful and loving inspiration from because the show is full of love. Like it just feels like
respect.
It just feels like delicious in a very loving way. Like again, that's when we talk about successful world building. It's like, oh, so much time and care went into making this look the way that it looks and feel the way that it feels. what is the conversation like? You know, we were talking with Val about color and bringing color into the real world, and especially with natural dyes. But what were the conversations like around kind of, you know, okay, air is going to be sort of orange and yellow. Water, we're going to see a lot of blues and purples and whites. Earth, we're going to see a lot of browns and yellows and greens. Fire, we're going to see a lot of reds, browns, blacks, gold. Obviously we have even pink with Ty Lee.
Yeah. Like Ty Lee,
you know, and then we have the Kyoshi Islanders, which is sort of its own
We're in blue,
thing. You know, like how is that? What are those conversations like?
Yeah, and nods to like Chinese culture, nods to Japanese culture. It's like you
Yeah.
feel all of these things.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of funny. As a production designer, you know, I don't really have a lot of control over final color. You know, that's the color design department as well. Brian talks with them. You know, they kind of set that tone a lot of the time. I do think it's funny when I draw. I was thinking about this earlier, how I draw when I'm designing something, when I'm thinking about it, I'm seeing color already like in my black and white, but I never really get to that point where I get to color it myself when I go when I'm on a show.
So you're drawing in black and white.
That.
I'm
drawing in black and white.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, if you have the time and you have that bandwidth to do it, you know, a tonal drawing, you know, at least between dark and light, between like how you define that area, how that overlapped. Sometimes that would help define and explain to the next person down the line about what you were thinking, at least. And it's kind of funny because so many times I would do my design and then I would see the color design come back and I was like, that is not at all what I was in my brain of how I saw it. But, you know, they always did a beautiful job. And I'm like, they still made it, you know, they made a beautiful thing out of something that, you know, I kind of threw out into the universe and, you know, didn't know what I was going to get back sometimes. But you know, if you have the opportunity to throw in like a color sketch or an idea of what you were thinking, you know, I would sometimes throw that in there, but usually time constraints, I didn't really have a lot of, you know, say in that. I didn't have a lot of time to do that as much as I'd wanted to. But, you know, I would be like, hey, I would outline something in a different color to be like, this should be a self-ink
Your stuff
line,
is amazing.
You know?
I know. It blows
I'm turning
my mind.
into stick figure, like make something.
I know. And also just like the reminder of, I mean, again, we've talked, I don't know, how do I consistently be surprised when we talk about how many different people, how many different skills, how many different people
such a collaborative art form, such a
the amount of people that breathe life into this one
So
image or cell or episode is mind-blowing because, you know, I, as a non-illustrator, in my mind, I'm like, well, obviously you have to deliver this from start to finish, like, but there's no way that would be possible. Of course, there has to be like different sets of hands.
That's the great thing about this podcast.
On those time constraints.
We're really
it blows my mind.
Going into a project that we all know and love, we're all a part of in our own little way. But for something to like kind of stand the test of time and be like this great thing, it's like all these things have to happen at the same time, and everyone has to somehow. It has to all work, and it's so many moving parts, and it's crazy that. A, anything gets done, and then B, if anything gets done, it turns out
and comes together.
Yeah, it comes together like Avatar.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. Bend your ear for ad-free episodes with Avatar Braving the Elements Premium.
Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts.